introduce our final speaker, Mr. Ahmed, who is a General Secretary of the Popular Front India. Anis happens to be joining us from the impacted region of India today. Thank you for your valued time, Anis. Please go ahead.
Yeah, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum to everyone and respected panelists and the respected organizers. I would like to thank for giving me an opportunity to present some thoughts before you. I will not repeat few things because I think my fellow panelists have covered most of the things, and I really thank them for covering most of the things which are very, very important to understand the current scenario. So because there is a history behind it, and how Professor just presented the history behind it, and before that, Sister Naila, how she presented the current scenario on a very overview. So that's very important to understand. So being here in the field, working day to day, confronting the RSS, so we have some insight of how this fascist work. Basically, we need to understand that the current scenario in India is it is an unprecedented scenario. The country never faced such scenario. And not just the Muslims, this scenario is not just a challenge for Muslims, but it's a challenge for the idea of India. What my fellow panelist, Professor, just presented about the threats that were envisioned by P.R. Ambedkar, we see the same things are happening today, because there was the idea of India. We all know that during the partition, there was a group which was not ready to have India defined as a secular democratic country. But with our constitution came in place and it defined India as a secular democracy, so many plans were thwarted, and from there onwards we see that a continuous plan was in place to completely defeat the idea of India. And unfortunately, what we are seeing today now, the problem is not just for Muslims, but the problem that is before the country is basically to the idea of India. See, we need to understand that the threat of RSS always existed. It's not a new threat that's happening. We just see them intensifying their work since last 8 years. To think that the entire scenario of India is changing for the last 8 years is not like that. It's actually a result of more than 90 years of work that's happening, and many players are involved in that. I won't go much into that, but I would really request all the viewers to please do some study about what really happened, how the Sangh Parivar or how the fascists worked in the last 90 years to understand what's happening in these 8 years. So now, if you see the major challenges the current country is facing, basically, I can just categorize them into three. There are three major socio-political changes that are happening, which we can say never happened in the past. These are major three socio-political changes. Number one, the RSS is ruling India and has complete control over the machinery. Complete control over the machinery, the government machinery. So this never happened before. You may be knowing that the RSS was part of the government in India even during in 1970s, and also they were also part of the government in the early 2000s. But now, when you compare the current rule of the BJP with the 1970s and in the early 2000s, you see a very clear difference happening here. And that difference is they have complete control on all the machinery of the government. People ask us, what was the RSS doing for the last 60, 70 years? This is what they were doing. They were infiltrating, they were creating sleeper cells in all the departments. They were sending people in media. They were sending people in the administration. They were sending people in various agencies, and they were asking them to just be silent. They were infiltrating in all political parties of India, and they were just asking them just to be silent and be active whenever they get a favorable scenario. And we see that nowadays many people feel shocked that, okay, we thought that this guy was very secular. All of a sudden, how can he become so communal? We used to see some film stars who used to be very, very secular. Some film stars even very close relation with Canada. We used to say they are very secular, very plural. But now all of a sudden we are saying that they are very communal. So it's not like they were secular and all of a sudden they have become communal. They were always sleeper cell of the RSS. But the RSS had instructed them to be silent don't speak up till we create a favorable environment. And today they have created a favorable environment where any person, whether he is a celebrity, whether he is a sportsman, whether he is from the administration, whether he's in the police, whether he's in the media, they don't care about hiding their identity anymore. And that is a biggest socio-political change that we're seeing, where the RSS has complete control on the missionary. It's not the BJP, it's the RSS that is having the control, complete control over the missionary. The second major change is socio-political changes that we are seeing in India today is that the Hindutva ideology, which was always a fringe ideology. Speakers have said that Nathuram Godse, who was the member of RSS, when he killed Gandhi, you know what happened after he killed Gandhi? There was a very huge backlash against the RSS, and there were many people in the RSS who were afraid to even call themselves as RSS because people hated their ideology. They were a fringe ideology. They were never a mainstream ideology. But now if you see, the Hindutva ideology, which was always considered as a fringe ideology, many people didn't even know what Hindutva is. Now it has become the mainstream ideology of India, the mainstream ideology of the government, the mainstream ideology of the administration, and that's a very big change. I'll give a small example. In 1992, when Babri Masjid was demolished, it was a 500 years old masjid which was demolished, and we see that at that time many people opposed it. Many people opposed the demolition of Babri Masjid. And in 1992, demolishing Babri Masjid was only the agenda of the RSS. It was not the agenda of Hindus. Hindus did not want Babri Masjid to be demolished. It was the agenda of the RSS to demolish Babri Masjid. But in 2020, when they were planning to form, they wanted to form build the temple. Building the temple was not only the agenda of the RSS, but RSS had given the agenda to the entire majority community. So in 1992, what was the agenda of only RSS had now become the agenda of the entire RSS. I just wanted to check whether I'm audible because I'm getting some messages that I'm not audible.
No. So Anis, you're coming in loud and clear. Please continue.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is the second thing. And number 3 is the crimes against Muslims are being justified. This is the biggest change that's happening. If there used to be crime against Muslims even earlier. There was a Gujarat 2002 riots that happened. There were Nelli, there was Bhagalpur, there was Bhiwandi, there was Meerut, there was Aligarh. Many riots that happened in India after 1965. Many riots happened. But what is the difference now and then? The only difference is that at that time, whenever there was any crime against Muslims, it was not justified. People used to speak against it. And now if you see any crime that is happening against Muslims, you see people justifying it. For example, you see, I always give an example of what happened in Assam. Sometime back you might have seen that a Muslim man was shot dead and we see a journalist jumping on his body. And what's new in that? Such thing always happened even before. But what happened now is that when that Muslim man was shot and when a journalist was jumping on his dead body, many people justified it. Many people justified it. They justified the police killing. This is the difference. Crimes were happening before, but crimes were condemned. Now the crimes are happening, the crimes are being justified. So this is the biggest 3 socio-political changes that we are seeing in India. And what is the result of this? Why it's happening? One of the major reasons is the polarization. The large-scale polarization. I must say that the polarization that is happening in India has never ever happened anywhere in the world. What's polarization? You create hatred within a community for another community. That's polarization. What are the biggest polarization that happened in our time? Hitler did a polarization against Jew. Among how many people did he polarize? Few 100 million people of Germany. But now in India, if you see, that's happening in almost around the polarization campaign that the RSS is running. It's almost among 600 to 700 million people they are running this polarization campaign. So this is the largest polarization campaign that has ever happened, I think, in human history. It's the biggest polarization campaign that is happening. So now due to this polarization, what we are seeing is one of the biggest problems that is happening because of this polarization is, I told you the changing scenarios, the three major changing scenarios that has happened, and the large-scale polarization that has happened. Because of this, what has happened is the people who speak against such injustice have diminished. Number one, in India, many people around the world may be thinking that India is a democracy, it's a multi-party democracy. Where are the opposition parties? Why are they not speaking? That's because in India, we have opposition parties, but we don't have opposition. It's a very important terminology. You need to understand that. We have opposition parties. We have n number of opposition parties, but we don't have opposition in India. And that's the reason we see that so many crimes are happening and we don't see anyone speaking. For example, take the case of the Babri Masjid verdict. The same people, especially the second next biggest party, that's the Congress, the same party who called the 1992 Babri Masjid demolition as a black day. They called it as a black day. They called it as a shame for the country. And we see that the same party was celebrating the verdict in one way, and the same party was celebrating the building of construction of Ram Mandir, and very senior leaders were giving praises, congratulations, and some people even went ahead and sent silver bricks for the construction of the temple. So what we are seeing is the opposition is not just silent, but the opposition is trying to imitate the ruling government. Why? The biggest question is why? It's because the narrative or the agenda of the opposition is not decided by the opposition, but the agenda is decided by the government. The opposition is afraid to criticize the government on core issues, especially when it is related to Islamophobia, when it's related to Dalit rights, when it's related to Adivasis, or whenever it's related to any ultranational nationalist issues. They are afraid. Why? Because the moment the opposition criticizes the government, the opposition is termed as anti-national, anti-India, anti-Hindu. So the opposition is afraid. And what the opposition is thinking is now, they are thinking that if we don't speak for the Muslims, if we are silent, if we just keep silent and if we agree and if we follow a soft Hindutva, we may come to power. This is the foolish thought of the opposition party in India. They are thinking that speaking for Muslims will make them lose votes, and being silent on the crimes against Muslims will get them votes. This is what the opposition is thinking, and that is the reason we don't have opposition. Secondly, the major opposition that the government had in the last 8 years was the social opposition. That opposition came from the activists, the organizations, the human rights group. These were the real people who gave the opposition to the government. There's some very, very genuine media personalities. These are the people who gave the opposition to the government, not the political parties. They never gave the opposition. So what the government did is they very brutally targeted this opposition. We know what happened. I request everyone to go and study what happened in Bhima Koregaon, read the history of Bhima Koregaon. What happened? Bhima Koregaon recently, for the last 5-6 years, it was going to become a very strong movement where Dalits were gaining confidence for that, because that was a very historical movement for the Dalits in India, especially from Maharashtra. And we were seeing that the Bhima Koregaon movement was gaining momentum. Every year, the crowd in Bhima Koregaon was just doubling and doubling, and it was becoming like a symbol of pride for the Dalits. And what happened is a riot was created. I will say a riot was created, violence was created, and all Dalit activists who were in the Bhima Koregaon organizing committees, and even some of the liberals and left activists who opposed the Narendra Modi government are behind the bar. They were targeted. Similarly, you might have seen in the CA protest. In the CA protest, the Muslims, for the first time after independence, we can see the Muslims came to the state on a social issue, on a socio-political issue, not on a religious issue. What happened after CA protest? A Delhi riots was created. Again, I will say the Delhi riots was created. It was created by the BJP, and after the riots, all the Muslim activists who were very active in the CA protests are behind the bar. The same thing happened with the farmers and the Sikh. A very great movement by the Sikh was going on, by the farmers was going on. A violence was created on 26th January, and after that we are seeing that the Sikh and the farmer activists were targeted. So the opposition, anyways, the political opposition was not there, but the social opposition is being targeted. And that is where we are seeing that even organizations like us, recently you might have seen what happened to Afrin, her house was demolished. What happened yesterday with Tista Sitalwaj, we know how she was arrested by just waiting for observation from the Supreme Court to happen, as if everyone knew what the observation would be from the Supreme Court. And you're seeing what's happening with Popular Front of India, and I don't see. And there is no agency in the government, there is no agency in India which is not after us, whether it's the ED, the Enforcement Directorate, the Income Tax, the NIA or ATS, everyone is after us. Why? Because they won't tolerate any social opposition. Now, going forward, people ask me, what will happen? So going forward, the problems are coming in three areas which we need to understand. And the first area will be the government will bring laws, the government will bring policies which will be directly anti-Muslims. The first problem will be directly by the government through laws. Similarly, how they did with CA, they did with the policy like the NRC, you'll see many such policies coming in. It will be the directly government will be involved in bringing anti-Muslim policies and justifying it. They will justify it. And then just bring in people to justify it. So first type of problem, the government directly will be involved is where they will be creating policies directly against Muslims. Number two, agencies and administrations will be used. Anyone who speaks against the government will be targeted with UAPA cases. I hope the viewers here, you all know what is UAPA. It's basically a draconian law which gives complete power to the central agencies, complete power to the investigation agency to arrest anyone, to put them behind the bar, and the person who is arrested in UAPA will not get bail. You won't be out on bail. That is the reason you see people are behind the bar for 6-7 years because they're not getting bail. Why? Because UAPA is imposed on them or invoked on them. So this is what they do. The second part, where the agencies, the government, the police, the administration will be used. This is the second problem. And third problem, that is what everyone is now discussing about, is about the genocide. It's the third part where there will be physical attacks. We have seen during Ram Navami. Recently, there was a Ram Navami rally. There was violence all across India. Do you think that violence happened by itself? It was a coordinated effort by the Sangh Parivar. Just see the modus operandi, how it happened. A protest goes through our Muslim areas. Provocative slogans are raised against Muslims. Provocative songs are played in high volume in front of Muslim masjid. All of a sudden, there is a news that stones come from the Muslims, and then we see Muslim shops are being burned, Muslims' houses are being burned, and after that, what happens? After that, Muslims are arrested and Muslims' houses are bulldozed. This is a modus operandi. It's a planned way. This is a planned strategy that's going on where physically Muslims are being targeted. So this is the three upcoming problems. And in India, I would like to close it here about what's happening, but there is a lot of social opposition is also happening against this, and everyone should be happy with that, what's happening, because there are many individuals, there are many activists, there are many social organizations who are presenting a very strong opposition, who are facing the heat, who are under threat. Many people, sometimes wherever we go, they ask us whether you all are safe, how the government, we must say that, yeah, the government is after us. They are using, it's a political vendetta. They are using the government machinery against anyone who speaks. Now, it's not just limited to Popular Front or any such organizations. Now, if you see, even the biggest political parties in India, their leaders are behind the bar. So earlier, when the ED and other agencies were coming against organizations like PFI or other individuals or other activists, no one used to speak. They used to be very silent that, yeah, it's some organization they are targeting. But now the same agencies are after them. It's after them. So, but what we are saying, such type of opposition is there, but people are still confronting the RSS. We see things are happening. Number one, there is a very strong democratic opposition happening on the streets whenever the government comes with new anti-people policies. Number two, whenever the agencies are used to misuse laws, there is a very strong legal opposition that is happening. And that is what we are also promoting, that strong legal agencies needs to be created, very strong legal system, support system needs to be created. And number three, the local communities needs to be empowered to face any threats like genocide. They needs to be strengthened. These three type of activities we see that's happening across India to counter the agenda of the RSS. Now, coming up to the point that's here, like a lot of people ask us, like, you all are facing on the field, what can people across the world do? You all should remember that in 1975, when there was an emergency, there was a very huge campaign against the emergency in India for 2 years. It was not only the ground campaign that forced Mrs. Indira Gandhi to revoke emergency. It was the pressure by the various international community on Mrs. Indira Gandhi for reinforcing democracy, for revoking the emergency. So we have recently seen what happened during the issue of the very hate speech against the Prophet of Islam Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So how the international community came up. But unfortunately, we don't see such thing of voice coming up from anywhere when Muslim houses were being bulldozed or Muslim youths are being arrested under UAP and put behind the bar. So there is a very good scope for democratic voices to come up. So I would just suggest a few things. Number one, the first thing that needs to be done is the RSS needs to be exposed. They need to be exposed. And I'm saying exposed in the sense many people don't know how fascist they are. They have to be exposed. You have to expose the people associated with RSS everywhere. There are people everywhere who are associated with RSS. Number two, we have to build very strong broad-based alliances. It's not that only Muslims are the most targeted people. Muslims are the first targeted group. Once Muslims are gone, they will target the Dalits and Adivasis. So there needs to be a strong broad-based alliances with all the groups. And thirdly, I'll just conclude my point in that. The third point, an important point, is confronting injustice is a part-time work only when the threats are in paper. But when the threats become a reality, confronting injustice is necessary. So I know many people are working, but this has to become a priority. This has we can see another genocide happening in India. This has to become a priority. It cannot be Saturday, Sunday work, or I'll be doing it whenever I'm free. It needs to be a priority. And number two, you have to be very steadfast, because the moment you try to expose RSS, they'll come after you. They'll come after you. We are seeing, for example, recently Peter Friedrich, who is a very big activist in US, how the RSS is coming after them. They control very huge resources. They have a very big machinery, and they'll come after you. But number three, one point I just like to tell out of my experience, no matter how big this RSS looks, no matter how much resources they have, they are the biggest coward that we have seen in our experience. They are the biggest coward. The moment you confront them, the moment you stand in before them, the moment you look into their eyes, you will see their cowardness. They look very big. They have all the resources, but the moment you are steadfast and you face all the challenges that come on you, you will see them going back. I'm telling out of experience, and it can be done. But again, like to conclude my talk with saying that everyone has a part to play. It's not required that everyone does the same thing. Identify your capabilities, organize, and just think what the best you can do. A lawyer can do on his part, IT professional can do on his part, academician can do on his part. Just identify what the best you can do and have a work plan for that. Thanks again for giving me an opportunity for presenting this point. Again, thank the entire organizers for running such a brilliant webinar. Thank you.
Thank